This video is brought to you by Ground News. Over the last few decades, the birth rate in the UK has been slowly dropping. In fact, in early January 2022, the Office for National Statistics reported that, for the first time on record, half of women in England and Wales remain childless by their 30th birthday. This has slowly been increasing since 1946, when it was just below 20%. While there are a number of factors for this, the economic situation and the difficulty for most parents to afford childcare is the most prescient one. So in this video, we're going to dive down into the data on the decline of the UK birth rate, why this is a problem, and how the government is planning to fix it. We're going to start by looking at the data on the birth rate in the UK, before going on to have a look at why this has declined, before finishing up and looking at what the government is doing to try and reverse this trend. Ever since the mid-1960s, the UK's fertility rate has been declining. This is roughly in line with the global decline in the fertility rate. Whereas women in the UK in 1964 had about 3 children each, this is now about 1.56. This is crucially below the replacement figure of 2.1. This huge decline in the fertility rate has led to the understandable decline in the population growth rate. In 1963, the global population grew by about 2.3%. Last year, it grew by 1%. Here in the UK, the population growth rate has fluctuated quite a lot in the last 50 years or so. In 1962, it was about 0.85%. In the 1970s, it decreased to the negatives before slowly improving until the early 2010s, when it reached 0.792% in 2015. This figure has been decreasing since then though, and is now all the way back down at 0.365%. So while the population is growing, it's not by much, and the government are presumably worried that the population may begin to decline again, as it did in the 1970s. This is bad for a few reasons. The main one is that Britain could face long-term shortages of working-age adults. At the moment, there are just under 3 over 65s to every 10 workers, but this could rise to 3.5 by the middle of the next decade, and could even reach 4 by the 2060s. Older members of the population don't work and require healthcare, pension payments, etc., which all need to be provided by the working age population. So if the population shifts significantly to having an older population, this will cause problems. The main ones being that the economy will start to struggle to afford healthcare and pensions. To counter this demographic crisis, the government needs to implement more pro-natalist policies. Policies that are designed to try and encourage people to have children, or at least remove barriers to doing so. But to understand how the government can do this, we need to first understand what the main barriers are to having children. Outside of biological reasons, such as being too old, a YouGov poll from 2020 demonstrated that one of the most likely reasons for people not to have children is that the cost is too high. This problem is actually particularly acute in the UK. The UK actually has the highest cost of childcare for couples of any OECD country, alongside Cyprus and the Czech Republic. In total, childcare accounts for about 29% of the wages of a couple. The average cost in OECD countries is only 10%, meaning that the costs in the UK is almost 3 times higher than the average. If we dig down further into the specifics, we see that in 2000, the annual fee for a full-time childcare place for a child under 2 cost £5,148. By 2021, this had risen to £13,939, a 171% increase. Over this same period, household earnings increased by just 66%. After looking into this data then, in the words of a New Statesman article, the question is not why the birth rate is falling, it's why anyone has kids at all. In an attempt to tackle this question, in the budget, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, announced some new measures that aim to reduce the high cost of childcare services in the UK. Currently, parents of children aged between 3 and 4 are eligible for 30 hours of free childcare per week. The government doesn't think that this is enough though, and has announced that they will provide £4.1 billion by 2026-2027 in order to provide extra childcare to parents of younger children. By 2024, working parents of 2-year-olds will get 15 hours of free childcare, and by September 2024, children from 9 months will get 15 hours of free childcare. All under 5s will get 30 hours of free childcare by September 2025. The Centre for Progressive Policy estimates that 1.5 million extra workers will be able to work more hours as a result of more accessible childcare. This, in turn, would add £27 billion a year to the economy. The government has also committed to substantially raising the hourly rate of childcare providers who are delivering the free hours. This is in response to criticism from nurseries that the hourly rate they're paid to provide the free hours is too low. Since 2017, the free hours pay has been cut by 13% in real terms. Additionally, research by the Coram charity shows that only half of local authorities even have enough places for working families. It should be remembered too that parents are not only having to contend with the high cost of childcare, but they have to do so during a cost of living crisis. As such, it's likely that the financial pressures presented by having children is a lot higher now than usual, even when accounting for the already high costs associated with children, such as childcare. This is likely why the government has chosen to act now. It's also worth noting that this issue is a personal one to the Conservatives as a party. In essence, people become more conservative as they age because they put more emphasis on traditional values such as that of family. If people don't have kids and form families, then people don't become more right-wing. This trend is already being observed, and cynically it could be argued that this policy is partly motivated by a desire to reverse this trend. We actually made a video discussing this already, and you can find that down in the description. It's unknown yet whether this will work and address the problems associated with the decline in the fertility rate. Perhaps it will work, or perhaps more needs to be done to properly address this problem. Only time will tell. If you do want to keep up with this story, a good way to do so is with today's sponsor, Ground News. Ground News is a website and app that puts all the world's media in one place, so you can compare how news is being covered by different outlets. This is important because the way we understand a story has a lot to do with how it's being framed. And Ground News makes it easy to sort through what's going on by providing bias, factuality, and ownership ratings for each source. For example, with every story, I can see the number of sources reporting and whether the coverage is evenly distributed across the political spectrum, according to ratings from independent news monitoring organisations. I can start to identify trends, like stories that are mostly covered by one side of the political spectrum. Then I can check how reliable the sources are as well as who owns them. But one of the coolest things to do is compare headlines to see discrepancies in the language used and the facts prioritised by different media outlets. It really is a fascinating way to read the news and unlike any news app out there. To give it a go, try ground.news/TLDR. You can subscribe to get unlimited access to all features and support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.